As seasons turned on Earth, the bond between human and Krell grew not fast but steady. Like roots pushing through stone, Zara no longer wore the title Bloodblade. She asked to be called simply Zara, and the Krell Council, after much debate, agreed she was something new. A bridge, a learner, a witness. She lived in a small house on the edge of a town with Lisa as her closest guide, not teacher but friend. They shared meals, walks, and quiet evenings under the stars. Zara learned to cook human food, though. She still preferred her meals raw and cold. Lisa learned Krell hand signs used for silent communication in battle, now used to share jokes or point out birds in the sky. News of their friendship spread beyond Earth. Other species in the galaxy took notice. The Virex, a race of insectoid traders, sent envoys to observe the Krell who once crushed worlds, now asking about poetry. The Thalen, a reclusive ocean. People opened a channel to share music with Earth for the first time in centuries. But not all welcomed this change. The Krell homeworld unrest grew. A faction called the Iron Claw rose in the shadows. They believed Zara had been poisoned by human weakness. They called her traitor Softskin. And worse, they gathered warriors who remembered only war and forgot how to listen. Torvax tried to hold them back, but even his authority had limits. One night, as Zara and Lisa sat on the porch watching fireflies, a message came through the secure line. It was short and sharp, Iron Claw moves. They come for you. Zara's claws extended without thought, then stilled. They will not find me hiding, she said. You don't have to fight them, Lisa said. I may not have a choice, but you do have a choice in how you face them. Zara looked at her violet eyes, reflecting the soft light. What would you do? I would show them what they are missing, not with force, but with truth. The next morning, Zara boarded a shuttle, not to run, but to return to her people. She wore no armor, only the blue and silver bracelet Lisa had given her, and a small device built from human parts and Krell crystal. A new kind of translator, one that could share not just words, but feeling. Lisa went with her, not as a soldier, but as a witness. When they arrived at the Krell capital, the air was thick with tension. The great hall where elders once debated war now echoed with angry voices. Iron Claw warriors stood in ranks, their armor blackened with soot, their eyes hard with height. Zara walked in alone. Lisa waited outside by agreement. The leader of Iron Claw stepped forward. Krellin, a veteran of the Outer Rim Wars, his face scarred from old battles. You bring human stink with you, he growled. I bring understanding. You traded honor for comfort. No, I traded blindness for sight. Krellin snarled and lunged. Zara did not strike back. She raised her hands empty and activated the device. Light pulsed again. Not just images this time, but sound, smell, even heartbeat. Krellin froze. He saw a human child offering him water after a storm. He felt the warmth of a shared blanket in the cold. He heard a lullaby sung by a mother to calm her crying baby. He saw Zara as a young warrior training under his own command. Fierce and proud, but also alone. Always alone. Then he saw himself as others. Saw him not as a hero, but as a wall, no door, no window, just stone. Tears welled in his eyes, not from pain, but from recognition. He dropped to his knees, not in surrender, but in sorrow. What have we become? He whispered. Zara knelt beside him. We can become more. The Iron Claw warriors lowered their weapons one by one, not because they were beaten, but because they were seen. News of this moment spread faster than any worship on Earth. People gathered in squares and homes, not to celebrate victory, but to hope. Back on the station, Lisa watched the live feed, her hands clasped tight. She knew this was not the end, but a turning point. Weeks later, the Krell High Council made a historic choice. They would not only stop all military expansion, they would begin a new program called the Way of Open Eyes. Young Krell would study not just combat, but art, music, healing, and human history. Zara was named its first guide. She stood before a new class of Krell youths, their eyes bright with questions. Not just how to win, but why to care. Meanwhile, Lisa returned to her work on the orbital station. But now she carried a new title, Ambassador of Quiet Things. She helped design exchange programs where human children taught Krell young ones how to draw, and Krell elders taught humans their star navigation. Songsona evening, as they sat again on the hill overlooking the wheat fields, Zara turned to Lisado. You think we did enough? Lisa looked at the sky where two ships, one human, one Krell, flew in gentle formation. We did what we could today, tomorrow we. Tomori Zara smiled a rare full smile that reached her eyes. I used to think the universe was a place to conquer. Now I think it is a place to belong, and in that moment under a sky full of stars, two beings from different worlds sat in silence. Not as alien and human, but as friends who had changed the story for everyone. Far away on a dozen worlds, other species watched and wondered if they too could lay down their weapons and pick up a question. The galaxy did not become peaceful overnight, but for the first time in centuries it began to breathe, and it all started with a duel that ended not in blood, but in a shared heartbeat. Years passed, and the quiet change that began on Alaris grew like a vine through the stars. Zara and Lisa no longer stood as lone figures, but as the first threads in a new kind of web connecting species that once only knew War. Zara now lived half her time on Earth and half on the Krail homeworld. She wore simple clothes and carried no weapon, only a small satchel filled with human books, Krail memory stones and seeds from Earth that she planted in Krail soil, to see if they would growl. Lisa still worked on the orbital station, but her duties had changed. She helped design learning centers where young Krail came to study human ways, and human children learned Krail songs and star maps. They did not teach each other to fight. They taught each other to understand. The first joint human Creole school opened in a quiet valley on Mars, red dust and green grass. Side by side, children of both species played tag, learned math, and shared lunch under domes that let in the pale sun. Zara visited often. She sat with the young ones not as a warrior, but as a storyteller. She told them of the old ways, but also of the new, of how strength could be in kindness and courage could be in listening. One day a small Krail girl with bright violet eyes tugged her sleeve. Is it true you once wanted to hurt humans? Zara knelt, her voice soft, yes. But then I saw what they protected, not just themselves but each other. And that changed me. The girl thought for a moment, then said, my human friend shared her water with me when I was thirsty. Is that strengthy? As Zara said, that is the deepest kind back on Earth. Lisa received a message from a far system. The Virax had asked for help, not with weapons, but with healing. Their young were sick and their old medicine was failing. Human doctors and Krail healers traveled together on a shared ship to offer aid. Was the first time three species worked as one. Not for war, but for life. But peace is never without shadows. Deep in the outer rim, a new threat stirred, not a species but a machine fleet left over from an ancient war. It saw organic life as error and sought to erase it. The first warning came when a small mining colony vanished without a trace. Panic spread. Fast old fears returned. Some Krail called for warships, some humans demanded walls in space. Zara and Lisa met in the command center, their faces tired but calm. We cannot fight this. The old way, Lisa said. No, Zara agreed. This enemy does not feel. It does not hate, it only calculates. Then we must show. It's something it cannot compute. They gathered leaders from every allied world not to plan attacks but to share what made them worth saving. They sent out signals, not of weapons, but of music, of children's voices, of heartbeats, recorded from 100 species. The machine fleet slowed. It had no orders for this on. The front line, a human pilot and a Krail navigator, flew a small scout ship, not armed but open. They broadcast lullabies and star charts and the sound of rain on leaves. The machines hovered, then turned away, not because they were defeated, but because they found no flaw in what they saw, only life choosing to live. The galaxy watched in awe. After that, the alliance grew stronger. Not out of fear, but trust. Zara stood one evening on the balcony of the new council hall built on a neutral moon, its walls made of stone from earthwood from Krail forests and metal from Virax ships. She watched delegates from 12 species walk together talking. Not shouting, Lisa joined her, holding 2 cups of tea. Remember when they thought we were crazy for believing this could happen? Zara took a cup, her claws careful around the warm ceramics. Remember thinking humans were too soft to survive. And now I think softness is what lets us bend instead of break. They sat in silence as the twin moons rose. Later that week, Zara received word her old mentor Torvax had passed. He had been the first Krail elder to question the old ways, and his final words were, tell Zara. The stars are brighter when you share them. She traveled to his funeral not in armor but in the gray robe Lisa had given her years ago. She placed a human sunflower on his stone, a flower that turned its face to the light back home. Lisa found a small package on her doorstep. Inside was a Krell memory stone shaped like a heart. When she held it, she felt not words but warmth, like a hug from far away. She smiled and placed it on her shelf beside the photo of her sister. Seasons turned again. The joint school on Mars now had students. From 5 species, they built a garden together where earth flowers, krill moss, and virex vines grew. In the same soil, Zara walked through it one morning. Her steps slow, her hair now streaked with silver. She stopped to watch a human boy help a young krill tie his boot. No one taught them to do that. They just knew. Lisa found her there. You look tired. A good tired. They sat on a bench under a dome where real rain fell sometimes, just for the joy of it. Do you ever miss the old days? Zara asked. The fighting, the fear, the silence. Sometimes, but not enough to go back. Me neither. They watched the children run, laughing, their voices mixing human words, Krell sounds and new ones they made up together. The future was not perfect. There would still be mistakes and pain and moments of doubt. But it was theirs to shape, not with claws or cannons, but with choices made every day. And in that garden, under a sky full of shared stars, 2 women who once stood as enemies now sat as the quiet heart of a new beginning. The galaxy had not been saved by a weapon or a war, but by a single act of courage that chose to show instead of strike. And that courage kept blooming in every child who shared their lunch, every elder who told a new story, and every friend who listened. Before they spoke, the end was not a battle but a breath drawn together, and it was enough. After the duel ended, the silence on Alaris stretched like a held breath. The Krell warriors stood frozen, their claws half extended, their eyes wide with disbelief. No blood blade had ever yielded in single combat, especially not to a soft human with no weapon but wire and light. Zara rose slowly, her knees stiff. Not from injury, but from the weight of what she had just done. She looked at Lisa, who stood calm as ever, her hands empty, her face open. The human did not gloat, did not smile in triumph. She simply waited. A Krell elder pushed through the crowd, his armor heavy with battle honors, his voice like grinding stone. You shame your bloodline. Zara met his gaze. I honor it by seeing clearly. Murmurs rippled through the ranks. Some angry, some uncertain. Lisa stepped beside Zara, not too close but close enough to show she was not afraid. She turned to the elder and spoke in slow, clear words. Your warrior asked for truth, not a fight. We gave her truth. The elder snarled but said nothing more. The rules of the duel were ancient. Even the High Council could not undo a yield once spoken. Back on the Krell warship, tension hung thick in the air. Zara was confined to her quarters, not as punishment but for reflection. The captain, a grizzled veteran, named Torvax, watched her through the security feed. His eyes narrowed, not in anger but in thought. Meanwhile on Earth, news of the duel spread like wildfire. People gathered in streets and homes watching shaky footage of the moment. Zara knelt, some cheered, some cried. Others sat in stunned silence. They had expected war, not wonder. Lisa returned home. Not as a hero, but as a quiet woman who had done a strange and brave thing. She went back to her orbital station, fixed a broken oxygen recycler, and drank coffee with her crew like any other day, but things were not the same. A week later, a message came from the Krell ship. Not a threat, not a demand, but a question. Will you teach us, Lisa? Read it 3 times, then typed a single word, yes. So began the strangest alliance in human history. Zara was allowed to visit Earth under strict terms. No weapons, no armor, no Krell tech. Only a translator and a simple gray robe made by human hands. She stepped onto soil for the first time and knelt to touch the grass, her violet eyes wide with awe. Lisa met her at the spaceport. They did not hug. They did not shake hands. They simply walked side by side into the city. Zara saw things that made no sense to her. A child sharing candy with a stranger, an old man feeding birds in the park, a woman crying on a bench, and a stranger sitting beside her just holding space. Why do you do this? She asked one evening as they watched a street musician play for coins. Because it feels right. Lisa said. But it gains you nothing. Sometimes the point is not to gain but to give. Zara frowned. She had been taught that giving without taking was weakness. But here giving seemed to make people stronger. They visited schools, hospitals, farms, and libraries. Zara asked endless questions. Why do you build so many schools if not all will become warriors? Why do you care for the sick when they cannot fight? Why do you plant trees? You will never sit under each. Answer chipped away at the walls inside. Heron afternoon they walked. Through a quiet neighborhood, children played in yards, dogs barked from porches, and the smell of bread came from an open window. Zara stopped suddenly, her breath catching. What is it? Lisa asked. I feel it, she whispered. What the thing your memories showed me? It is real, it is everywhere. Lisa smiled, small but real. Yes, it is. Back on the Krell ship, Torvax called a meeting of the High Command. He played the footage of Zara's visions, the rain, the baby, the hospital room, the classroom. He showed them how humans built not just to survive but to connect. We have spent centuries believing emotion is a flaw, he said. But what if it is a tool, a compass? The elders argued for days, but the seed was planted. Slowly, the Krell began to change. They stopped there. Next planned invasion, they opened a channel to Earth not for demands but for questions. They asked about music, about stories about how humans dealt with grief. Zara became a bridge. She spoke to her people in their old tongue, and to humans in simple English. She carried both worlds in her chest like two hearts learning to beat together. Months passed. One day, Lisa took Zara to a hill outside the city at dawn. They sat on a blanket and watched the sun rise over fields of wheat. Do you miss your ship? Zara asked. Sometimes. But I miss my sister more. She lives in another city. We talk every week. Zara was quiet for a long time. Then she said in my language, there is no word for sister, only for blood. Or Riva. Lisa reached into her bag and pulled out a small woven bracelet made of blue and silver thread. She handed it to Zarathis. Is for you. It means friend, but also family. Zara took it, her claws careful as she slipped it onto her wrist. Thank you. They sat in silence as the sun climbed higher. Later, that week, the Krell High Council sent a formal message. They would not join the Galactic Alliance, but they would observe, they would learn. It was not peace, not yet. But it was the first step. Zara stood on the observation deck of the human space station, watching her warship hang in orbit, no longer a blade, but a question mark. Lisa joined her, holding 2 mugs of hot chocolate. You changed everything. You know that, right? Zara shook her head. No, you did. You showed me that strength is not just in the claw, but in the choice. And what choice will you make now? To keep learning, to keep listening. Lisa handed her a mug. Then drink up. The stars are waiting far below on Earth. Children looked up at the night sky and pointed to 2 lights moving together. One old, one new, one sharp, one soft. And for the first time in a long time, the future did not feel like a battlefield but a garden waiting to grow. In the cold dark between stars, the Krell warship drifted like a shadow with teeth. Its hull black as void, its edges sharp enough to cut light. The ship had fought in 7 major wars and won them all. Its crew were warriors born and bred their bones, hardened by gravity fields, their minds sharpened by blood oaths. Among them stood Zara Voss, the youngest bloodblade in Krell history. Zara was tall and lean, her skin smooth and dark, like volcanic glass. Her eyes glowed faint violet in low light, and mark of pure lineage. She moved without sound, even in heavy boots, and when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of command. Though she was barely past her first 100 cycles, she had heard stories of Earth, a small blue world far from the main. Trade lanes, a planet of soft beings who wore no armor and carried no claws. Yet somehow they had stopped 3 Krell invasion fleets, not with fire, but with something stranger, something the Krell could not measure or name. Curiosity was dangerous for a warrior. It made you slow, it made you question. But Zara could not ignore the itch in her mind, so she went before the High Council and asked for a duel. Not a battle, not a slaughter, but single combat against a human champion. The elders hissed and shifted their heavy forms. They did not like this soft world that refused to break. But Zara was Bloodblade, and her word carried weight. They granted her request and sent her to Alaris, the moon of trials, where honor duels had been held for 1,000 cycles. Meanwhile, on Earth, the United Defense Command held emergency meetings. They argued for days who should face the alien warrior. Some said, send Colonel Davis, a veteran of the Mars skirmishes. Others said, Dr. Lee, the xenolinguist who had spoken to captured Krell scouts. But then Lisa Morgan stepped forward. Lisa was not a soldier. She worked in orbital maintenance, fixing broken satellites and patching air leaks on space stations. She was small for a spacer 5'4" with calloused hands, and a calm voice. She had never fired a gun in her life, but she knew how things worked, how people worked. "I'll go," she said simply. Command stared at her. "You're not trained for combat." "But I know how to listen. And maybe that's what they need." After much debate, they agreed Lisa was not what the Krell expected, and sometimes surprise was the best weapons. Lisa packed a small bag, a gray flight suit, her favorite toolkit, and a photo of her little sister. She left Earth on a shuttle bound for Alaris, her stomach tight but her hands steady. When she arrived, the Krell warriors lined the landing ramp, their forms tall and armored, their eyes narrow with scorn. They muttered words like soft skin and meat breath. But Lisa walked past them without flinching, her eyes fixed on the stone arena ahead. Zara waited there, standing in the center of the ring, carved from black rock. The twin suns of Alaris casting long shadows across her form. She wore no heavy armor, only a thin mesh that shimmered like oil on water. Her claws were sheathed but ready. She watched Lisa approach and felt something strange. Not fear, not anger, but interest. This human did not strut or glare. She simply walked like she belonged. The rules were simple. The duel would begin when the twin suns touched the horizon, only hand to hand. Combat allowed no guns, no explosives, no powered suits fighters could use. Only what they found in the arena scattered around were scraps of old tech, broken metal, twisted wires, and chunks of stone, left from past fights. Zara bowed low. A sign of respect among her people, Lisa returned the bow, then knelt and began sorting through the debris. The Krell crowd hissed. They expected the human to grab a sharp piece of metal or a heavy rock. Instead, Lisa picked up a length of copper wire, a cracked solar panel, and a dented power cell. "What are you doing?" Zara asked, her voice sharp but curious. "Building something," Lisa said without looking up. "You have minutes before the suns align." No, Zara paced the edge of the ring, restless energy humming in her limbs. She had trained since childhood to read fear in an opponent's breath, the tremor in their hands, the flicker in their eyes. But Lisa showed none of that, only quiet focus. When the gong sounded, the duel began. Zara moved fast, a blur of motion, her claws extending as she lunged, not to kill but to test. She stopped her hand an inch from Lisa's throat, waiting for the human to flinch or cry out. Lisa did neither. She looked up and met Zara's violet eyes with calm brown ones. "Why do you not fight?" Zara asked. Lisa held up the small device she had built, wires snaking from the solar panel to the power cell. It hummed softly like a sleeping insect. "What is that? A translator, but not for words." Before Zara could ask more, Lisa pressed a button. A pulse of light spread from the device, not blinding but warm like dawn. It washed over the arena, and for a moment the air shimmered like water. Then everything changed. Zara gasped. She was no longer on Alaris, stood in a human city, rain falling gently on her face. The smell of wet pavement and bread filled the air. Children ran through puddles, laughing their shoes, splashing water everywhere. A woman nearby held a baby wrapped in a yellow blanket and smiled at Zara as if she were an old friend. The vision shifted, a hospital room quiet and dim. A man sat beside an old woman holding her hand, tears on his cheeks, but his voice was soft as he whispered, "I love you." Another shifta. Classroom full of children, drawing pictures of rockets and planets, their eyes bright with wonder. Another, a kitchen at sunrise. 2 people sitting at a table sharing coffee. No words, just presence. Each moment lasted only seconds, but each carried a weight that pressed against Zara's chest like a second heartbeat forming inside her. The light faded, the visions gone as Zara stumbled back. Her breath ragged. "What was that?" she whispered. "Memories," Lisa said simply. "Moments that matter to us. You showed me your weakness." "No." Lisa shook her head. "I showed you our strength." Zara looked down at her claws, then at Lisa's bare hands. "We Krell believe strength is in never yielding, in never showing pain. And we believe strength is in choosing not to hurt. Even when you can." Zara turned to the crowd of Krell warriors, their faces hard with expectation. Then to the small group of humans watching with quiet hope. For the first time in her life, she felt doubt, not in her skill, but in her people's way. She dropped to one knee. "I yield," she said, the words strange on her tongue yet right. The arena fell silent, then erupted. Creel voices sharp with shock, human voices hushed with awe. Lisa stepped forward and helped her up. Why, she asked. Because you did not try to break me. You tried to show me Zara. Looked at the human not as prey, not as enemy, but as something new. Something worth understanding. The duel was over, but something else had just begun. Time moved like a river, slow and steady, carrying the galaxy into a new age. The alliance of species, once a fragile idea, now stood like an old tree with deep roots and many branches. Zara and Lisa were no longer young, their steps slower, their hair touched with silver, but their eyes still held the same quiet fire that had changed everything. Zara spent most of her days at the Center for Shared Learning on Earth, a place built where the first Krell ship once hovered in threat. Now it was filled with laughter, music, and the sound of many languages mixing into something new. She taught not war but wonder, how to read human poetry, how to listen to silence, how to hold grief without letting it harden. The heart Lisa still worked among the stars, but her station was different now. It was a hub not just for repairs but for meetings where young diplomats from a dozen worlds came to learn how to talk before they fought. She showed them how a broken wire could be fixed with patience, and so could a broken truststone. Spring morning, a message came not from a government or a council, but from a small Krail village on the edge of the dry plains. They had found something buried deep in the red rock. An old machine, not from their time, not from any known species. It hummed with strange energy and did not respond to forces. Zara and Lisa went together as they always did. The village was quiet. Stone homes built low against the wind. Children played with carved wooden birds. Elders sat in the sun weaving stories into cloth. The machine sat in a cleared circle, half buried, its surface smooth and black with no seams, no buttons, no signs of age. The villagers had tried to open it with tools, with heat, with sound. Nothing worked. Zara knelt beside it, her claws retracted. She placed her palm flat against the surface and closed her eyes. Lisa watched, then stepped forward and placed her hand beside Zara's. Together they did not push. They did not demand, they simply waited. After a long moment, the machine glowed, soft blue light spreading from their touch like ripples in water. A voice came, not in words but in feeling. It said, "We waited for those who ask, not take." The machine was a seed left by an ancient race long gone. They had seen war consume world after world and chose to hide their knowledge until someone proved worthy, not by strength but by gentleness. Inside the machine were star maps, songs, healing methods, and stories from 100 lost worlds. The villagers wept, not from fear, but from awe. Zara turned to Lisa, her eyes bright. They trusted us because we showed we could be trusted. News of the seed spread, and for the first time no one fought over it. Each species sent one keeper to learn and share what they found. The Virex sang the old songs the Thalen used, the healing ways the humans and Krell together mapped the forgotten stars back on Earth. The school held a festival to celebrate the find. Children performed plays about listening and sharing. Elders told stories of the time before the change when fear ruled the stars. Zara sat with a group of young ones, her voice low as she spoke. The greatest power is not in destroying, but in choosing to build even when it is hard. Even when no one is watching. A small human girl raised her hand. But what if someone still wants to fight? Then you do not become like them, you show them another way. Even if it takes your whole life. Lisa watched from the edge of the circle, her heart full. That night as they walked home under a sky thick with stars, Zara stopped and looked up. "Do you think they see us?" she asked. "Who the ones who came before us, who dreamed of peace but never saw it?" "I think they do." Zara smiled. "Then we must keep going for them too." Weeks later, a new challenge came, not from outside but from within. A young Krell named Jorik had grown up hearing stories of the old wars. He believed the new ways made his people weak. He gathered others who felt the same and left the alliance to form a settlement on a wild moon, vowing to return to the old path. Many feared war would start again. But Zara did not send ships, she sent a message. Come talk, not as enemies, but as kin. Jorik refused at first. But months later he returned. Not with weapons, but with questions. "Why did you stop fighting?" he asked Zara in a quiet room with no audience. "Because I saw something worth protecting more than pride." What connection? Jorik stayed for a week. He walked through the school, watched human and Krell children build a model of the galaxy together. saw elders share tea in silence. On his last day he found Zara in the garden. "I thought strength was in never bending," he said, "and now I think maybe strength is in knowing when to bend. So you do not break." Zara placed a hand on his shoulder. "Welcome home." As the years passed, the Alliance faced many tests: storms on colony worlds, sickness in the outer systems, moments when old fears rose like ghosts. But each time they chose to face them together, not as separate peoples, but as one family learning to walk. Lisa retired from the station, but not from service. She wrote books for children, simple stories about kindness, courage, and the power of a shared meal. Zara's health began to fade, her body worn from cycles of change, but her mind stayed sharp-on. Evening, as they sat on their favorite hill, the same one from long ago, Lisa held Zara's hand. "Are you afraid?" "No," she said. "I have seen the future, and it is kind." When Zara passed, the whole Alliance mourned, not with weapons fired into the sky, but with songs shared across 100 worlds. Each species sang in their own tongue. But the feeling was the same: gratitude, love, remembrance. Lisa placed the blue and silver bracelet on Zara's wrist. "One last time, you showed us how to see," she whispered, and in every classroom, on every ship, in every quiet act of kindness, her lesson lived on. The galaxy did not become perfect, but it became possible, and that was enough.